Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm very excited because today we're going to talk about a set of books that are very close to my heart. We're going to talk about Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, which is a trilogy of books published back 20 years ago, and they consist of Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. Northern Lights was published in the States under the name The Golden Compass, so you may know it by that, and particularly as that it was under that title that there was a movie adaptation about 10 years ago. Now, there's a particular reason why I'm revisiting these books now. Actually, there's a couple of reasons. Well, firstly, I love these books and they're a real comfort read to me, and I think they're probably amongst the finest books that I've ever read in my life, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in saying that. However, these books were published 20 years ago, yet last year Philip Pullman returned to the world of Lyra and his dark materials that he set in this book in a new book that he had published called The Book of Dust. The Book of Dust is currently sitting unread on my shelf because I wanted to really refresh my memory of the world of his dark materials before I got stuck into the Book of Dust. And I really wanted everything to be fresh in my mind and all the threads and the characters and the themes to be there before I really enjoyed and devoured the Book of Dust. But secondly, I wanted to talk about these books for another reason, and that is often when we talk about books and what we've read, there's an assumption that the classics have all been read by everyone. And there's a sort of shock if someone says, oh, I've never read Little Women or Pride and Prejudice, or I've never read anything by George Orwell. It's sort of like, oh, you haven't read these? Like there's a sort of judgment there. And the truth is, we can't all have read everything. I've never read Ulysses, and I may well go my whole life with never reading Ulysses. Yet I loved Moby Dick, and other people will never read Moby Dick, and that's fine. But one of the things I really wanted to encourage is if I can encourage more people to enjoy his dark materials who may not have been around or of reading age 20 years ago when they were published, or perhaps it was just a series of books that passed them by. The opportunity for me to get more people to talk about these books and to read about these books is very special. And as it happened, as I was rereading this trilogy recently, there was another announcement that there is going to be a TV adaptation of these books, which is very exciting for me because The Golden Compass was a truly awful film and did not come anywhere near doing these books justice. Now, it's highly likely that the TV series won't do the books justice because these books have rightly been acclaimed the world over as some of the finest writing in the previous 20, 30 years. They're classified as young adult fantasy novels, but they're even more so than the Harry Potter books. These have been devoured by adults as well because the themes are so huge and so relevant and so profound that they have grabbed everyone from every age possible. So, enough with the hype. What is Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass all about? Well, it's set in a parallel universe, and in it we follow Lyra, a 12-year-old girl who goes on an adventure because her best friend Roger and her uncle Lord Asriel have gone missing. It's very much a world similar to ours, but it's a world in turmoil. Lyra is sort of been raised by scholars in what we would know as Oxford University in the UK. However, her uncle, Lord Asriel, has been conducting experiments and scientific analysis into a phenomenon known as dust. And this has scared the establishment so much that he has gone missing on one of his trips in the Arctic. When this gets linked to the sudden absence of her best friend Roger, Lyra decides to take it upon herself to find out what is the chaos in the adult world that is causing mutterings behind closed doors and for key people to suddenly go AWOL. Because the world that Lyra lives in is a theocracy. It is dominated by the church, and the church suppresses heresy with a passion, with a fervour. And it is this these experiments into dust that Lord Asriel has been doing is understood to have been threatening the grip of the church on society. And so Lyra, in her bid to find out what's happened to her uncle and her best friend, ends up getting wrapped up in a huge global political war and conspiracy that is where people are looking to break the ferocious grip of the church on society. Now, there are some lovely aspects to this book, particularly as this is a parallel universe. Philip Pullman gets able to play a lot on what we would know as the edges of our reality. So here, for example, every person has what is known as a demon, which is an external physical manifestation of their soul in animal form. So each person will have an animal close to them, whether it is a fox, whether it is a bird, whether it's an owl, whether it's a fly, whether it's an ant, that is the physical manifestation of their soul. And in children, for someone of Lyra's age, these spirit animals, these spirit demons, can change form. So Lyra's spirit demon is constantly changing form, and is a wonderful way of showing Lyra's inner anxiety or inner resilience as she goes on her adventures. And they're phenomenal adventures where she goes up to the Arctic, gets involved in wars between polar bears, sentient polar bears who can speak and forge iron and steel. She gets caught up in witches, in angels, in sort of diminutive pixies. It's a world where it takes all of the sort of fantasy elements that we always think of as a little bit not real, and makes them real, makes them very real and very oriented and anchored in Lyra's world. So it's a hugely expansive and exhilarating adventure. What Philip Pullman then does is he blends almost effortlessly religion and science. So this is both fantasy and reality, because what he then does is he merges us into astrophysics and dark matter and black holes, where Lyra, and indeed Lord Asriel, her uncle, had been able to shift into other worlds, into other parallel universes. So it works. Philip Pullman's books are anchored in the theory that there are infinite parallel universes, and the subtle knife in book 2 is the tool that can take you from one universe to the next. And it's through these explorations of worlds that are constantly similar but different to our own, where Lyra and her friends and her companions unravel the mysteries of the universe, and together they set out to threaten the hold of the church on Lyra's world. It is, I don't know if I can even get across how exciting this is. Fantasy has always been a bit tricky. So I know when people think of fantasy, they think very much of Lord of the Rings. Or they might even think of Harry Potter. And certainly Harry Potter is an interesting comparison, because these books are also classified as fantasy YA. But the comparison with Harry Potter is more interesting because it is very much anchored in our world, and one that's slightly different. What's even more impressive about this is these themes are adult and profound. Like, we're talking about the creation, the Paradise Lost, John Milton, and the fall of Satan and the fall of the demons into the world and sort of being banished by God. We're talking about Adam and Eve. These are slights at the Catholic Church, at the Inquisition, it looks at the concept of sin. It looks at the concept of parental responsibilities. There is so much in there that it's almost like a sort of Frankenstein in a YA world. There are so many great themes in here, and Lyra is such an exciting, willful character who, even as a 12-year-old girl, has a real spirit and energy that makes her a companion that you want to spend time with as you follow her through these 3 books and you zoom through these 3 books. It is wonderful. And there's such an arc of emotion, from exhilarating battles and wars between witches groups and sort of men with guns. It's just, the blend is extraordinary. You have helicopters and zeppelins, you have fighter planes and magic. It's just such a wonderful and exciting blend, and Philip Pullman's execution is exquisite. The only thing I would say is, revisiting these books after all this time, I'm going on, so I'll try and wrap this up very quickly, is interesting how white these books seem to me 20 years later. Obviously the world has moved on, awareness has become on diversity, inclusion is much more there, and you sort of think there's no need necessarily for the references to white skin in the central characters. And particularly as in my head I always picture Idris Elba as Lord Asriel, but then that's because I largely always picture Idris Elba in everything, because he's such an adventurer. And he's a strong, masculine guy. You think, oh, Idris. And no surprise, he was actually played by the white James Bond, Daniel Craig, in the Golden Compass film. But you just think, if those bits had just slipped away, there is no need for these characters to be white. And I really loved the huge range of stories and worlds and groups and communities that Lyra meets on her ways. There's some great commentary on class here, as well as race, which is subtle but is there. I adored these books, and I'm waffling and I'm going on, but I'm so glad I've reread them. Perhaps you haven't reread these in a while, but if you haven't, do, because not only are they extraordinarily comforting reads, but they are exhilarating and a reminder of just what an achievement his Dark Materials was. A fantastic trilogy.